Newcastle's own Belinda Clark led the way for Australia at the #1 Sports Oval today. She made short work of the English attack, smashing an unbeaten 146. It was her best performance with the bat against the Poms. She was ably assisted at the crease by Joe Broadbent, who contributed 85, their partnership setting the Aussies up for a massive total. Australia just simply wasn't bothered by the English bowling attack, ending their 50 overs at 2 for 299. The English, though, just didn't know how to cope with the Aussie bowling attack. By the end of the 7th over, they'd crashed to just 4 for 11, the match all but over. Charmaine Mason was the destroyer, finishing with figures that would make even Glenn McGrath drool. 5 for 9, a new Australian women's record against the Poms. England dug in grimly. However, they only managed to survive until the 40th over, all out for just 79. The win gives the Australian women a clean sweep of the 4-match demonstration series. The England side now heads home to lick its wounds and look back on some valuable experience. It's hoped other international sides will follow in England's footsteps.
This means a lot to Newcastle cricket because we like to promote the game, whether it's for men or women at all representative levels.
The NRL has launched a 2000 campaign with Tom Jones leading the way. It's met mostly with thumbs up from the fans, and I must say I think it's a winner. It's important to note that Tom Jones has some legacy to the game. His uncles helped start rugby league in Wales. He knows the game and he loves to watch it. And on to round 1. Sydney Roosters will take on the Parramatta Eels. Sydney Roosters, with the inclusion of Craig Wynne and Craig Fitzgibbon, will certainly make up the loss of David Barnhill and Andrew Walker. While Parramatta thumped the West Tigers in a trial match a couple of weeks ago, Parramatta have injuries to Vella and Jason Smith. I think the Sydney Roosters can get up here. St George Illawarra will take on the Cronulla Sharks. The Dragons should be one of the form teams at the start of the year under coach David Waite. Cronulla are without Jason Stevens and David Peachey. It's possibly the worst 2 injuries that could happen to the club. Jason Stevens could be out for up to 6 weeks. St George to win. Penrith Panthers will play the Cowboys. Penrith have 7 players out with injuries. Their bad luck continues from last year, but North Queensland do not travel well. They have a lot of expectations on them this year, but the Panthers will take this game out. Canberra versus Canterbury. It's a home game for Canberra. The consistency of Canterbury and their good form from last year will see the superfit Bulldogs do the job. Northern Eagles versus Newcastle. Graham Park is a fantastic arena and will be turned into a coliseum at 8 p.m. this Sunday in a game which will be a local derby. Newcastle to win. Players to watch out for: Adam Muir and David Fairley. Auckland Warriors versus Melbourne. Melbourne Storm are going into this competition with great confidence after winning their World Cup challenge earlier this year. I've tipped Melbourne to win against a much improved Auckland Warriors side in a tight victory. West Tigers and the Brisbane Broncos. I saw the Broncos trial against the Cowboys earlier this year. They look like the team to beat. Broncos to win in a packed house at Campbelltown. And some sad news. Laurie Nichols, Balmain and Rugby League's #1 supporter, passed away this week. He was a tireless worker for charities and good causes. He'll be sorely missed by everyone, and I can tell you it was an honour to call him a friend. I'm Paul Harrigan, NBN News.
The Prime Minister hasn't visited the Rutherford picket, so a busload of sacked textile workers travelled to Maxville to confront him. They asked for an urgent guarantee of their entitlements.
We haven't got time. We really haven't got time to be playing around with this. It's got to be done quickly and it's got to be done properly, and it's got to be done for the Australian worker.
On the North Coast, as part of his regional tour, the PM continued to push the GST and press the flesh. Back in Rutherford, sacked workers boarded another bus, this time to rendezvous with the Prime Minister at Williamtown Air Base for a special meeting organised only last night. He spoke with 5 workers for an hour, but didn't guarantee $11 million in outstanding entitlements.
We'll discuss it in full in Cabinet on Tuesday, and we'll make an announcement after that.
The Maitland Mayor says the visit brings hope.
He wouldn't be here if he wasn't going to try and offer help.
Workers broke down, telling the PM how they have no money and don't know what's happening next.
Some of us are using food vouchers to buy food, and it's quite humiliating actually. The Prime Minister was easy to talk to. He's down to earth. It was good.
I think he was very sympathetic to our cause, and I've come out smiling today. It's the first time I've smiled for 2 weeks, and I think that he'll be there for us.
Mr Howard left with a wave. The union's not smiling yet.
What we got is a commitment that the government, and John Howard in particular, will look at your plight. That's all we got out of it.
David McElwain, NBN News. For many older people, living in a caravan or leisure park ensures their pension will last each week. Kathy Blackett moved to Spinnakers at Belmont in 1986. She lives in her home, pays an $80 site fee every week and has strong views on the GST being collected on top of that.
Well, we just won't pay it. He can put us in jail. That'll feed us.
Kathy went to see her local member and rallied the support of other park residents against the tax. They signed petitions today to try and stop the government classing their homes as holiday accommodation.
We want the same privileges as people outside. He reckons we're tourists. I've been here 14 years and there's a lot of people been longer.
The government is forcing people that live in their own homes in parks such as this to pay GST on the rental that they pay for their sites where they keep their own homes.
The federal member for Shortland says she's determined to take the government to task over the issue. David McElwain, NBN News. Along Newcastle's waterfront, the most significant developments seem to be signs erected by Honeysuckle. However, the release of harbourside land at Wickham is the first package offered by the Development Corporation for purely commercial purposes. Today it was received with mixed feelings amongst the business community.
Well, I think it'd be a great idea if something happens. The biggest problem we've got is there's a lot of release of land from Honeysuckle, but unfortunately there's nobody been building on it. So, but it's good to see. It's nice to see it's on the market finally.
While building is well underway on Linwood Estate, where Honeysuckle sold land for residential development, the Hunter Business Chamber says the Development Corporation's performance last year wasn't good enough.
I expected Honeysuckle to boom, but at this period of time we're still disappointed. I think what we've got to look forward to is for them to really grab hold of it and make sure that the Honeysuckle does what it's supposed to do, revitalise the CBD of Newcastle.
The proposed sale of National Textiles assets to cover $6.5 million owed to Scottish Pacific Business Bank appears to have fallen through, a situation leaving workers with much less than the 50 cents in the dollar they had hoped for their entitlements.
It could even mean their dividend would reduce to probably less than 20 cents in the dollar.
And that's a bloody disgrace.
Workers found shelter from the searing sun on the Rutherford picket today, but no respite from their worsening situation.
I just feel terrible. I don't think I can feel anything. I think we're just still numb.
Why don't they pull their heads in and give us our money, and they can fight and do what they like. All we want is what we're entitled to.
The dispute amongst creditors will leave an even greater shortfall in $11 million worth of workers' entitlements for Cabinet to consider on Tuesday.
They're the only ones with the cash to bail these employees out. And we talked to John Howard yesterday and we got promises that it will be looked at. What we need is more than promises, we need some action.
Speedway drivers love putting on a show, and this earned plenty of points with the crowd, even though the landing wasn't quite right. Lismore and Newcastle V8 Dirt Modifieds fought it out in a teams event, with the home side showing up their North Coast rivals, even if they all got a bit too close for comfort. Mark Robinson saved face for the visitors, winning the feature final in the class. But it was the speed cars that put on the real show, with visiting American star Danny Smith needing everything to hold out Adam Clark in the final. At Gosford, an Australian championship was on the line. Some literally threw themselves into the final of the 500cc's. Jason Lyons walked away shaken but not stirred. Victorian Lee Adams, though, rode off with his 5th national championship, defending champion Todd Wiltshire 3rd.
We are going to be able to meet all of the needs of this community for the next 50 to 60 years.
If all goes according to plan, a Westpac rescue helicopter could soon be calling Tamworth home. The Newcastle-based operation is hoping to expand its services into the North West and New England regions, pending final approval from the Westpac trustees.
We're just waiting for a very important meeting with the Westpac trustees on Thursday coming in Sydney, and that will then, we hope, verify another very important funding stream.
Vital travelling time to the scene of emergencies will be slashed if the service sets up a local base.
People getting back to a major trauma care centre in the shortest possible time, that can only be a positive for the outcome of the patient.
The service could be up and running within 6 months. The Westpac Rescue Helicopter's annual fundraising Cycle Classic received a boost today, with $10,000 being donated from the RTA. The funds were used to sponsor a promotional trailer used during the 1,100 kilometre trek, which kicks off on March 4. Meanwhile, Cessnock Mayor John Clarence and local state member Kerry Hickey launched a new initiative for the RTA's Big Ride, which allows people to join the 16-day event just for one day. The charity ride, which starts on the 25th of March, sees cyclists ride from Tweed Heads to Hornsby, raising money for the MS Society. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
Fennell and Edmonds Bays may be picturesque, but they're certainly not without their problems. Excess nutrients and sediment are upsetting the local ecosystem. Now the Clean Up Lake Macquarie project is trying to restore nature's balance.
Unfortunately, human impact has resulted in so much sediments and nutrients coming into these that it's stressed.
WBM Oceanics have been selected to start the first stage of a remediation program, studying the two bays and suggesting solutions. Once plans are finalised during stage 2, $2.5 million in works will begin in stage 3.
What we're trying to do is to bring back a healthy ecosystem, allow it to continue to be an important fish nursery, and to have a system that is as close as possible to imbalance and not causing problems to people with algal blooms.
Meanwhile, concern over Belmont's 16-footers plans to build 2 new multi-level car parks has resulted in Lake Macquarie Council extending its deadline for community comment. It's also organised a public meeting to discuss the issue at Belmont Sportsman's Club for Saturday the 19th. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Starting off the bench against many of his old teammates in the Northern Eagles, Dave Fairley played with all the vigour you'd expect from a player pushing for a starting spot with his new club, Newcastle. And it hasn't gone unnoticed by Warren Ryan, promoting Fairley to start ahead of Matt Parsons, who, in contrast, didn't have one of his better games.
He's a very honest player, and he said that he wasn't happy with how he went, and he's promised that he'd never play that badly again.
Although glad to get the nod to start, Fairley believes all players can take something out of his selection.
It just shows that everyone has to be on the job, and because if you're not, there's somebody there that can do the job as well.
And he's keen to get a taste of a packed marathon stadium that's on his side.
It's going to be great to have the crowd behind me for once. I've been coming up here for a long time and been on the receiving end quite a few times as well.
Darren Albert has been named in the team to play Melbourne as well, with both he and Tamana Tahu expected to be fit in time for Saturday night. While Fairley's move into the run-on side is the only change in the pack, with Lenny Beckett joining Parson on the bench. However, there is still no date for Robbie O'Davis's return, with a specialist report last week not the news Knights officials wanted to hear.
Initially, Sal told me, it shocked me, he said 4 to 6 weeks that he'd been told.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Celebrations on the picket line this afternoon following news that the $11 million owed to the workers would be paid.
That is absolutely fantastic. I can hardly believe it. We can all get on with our lives now. Wonderful. I can sleep tonight now.
Federal Cabinet thrashed out the rescue package today, $2 million each coming from the federal and New South Wales governments, plus an additional $2 million from the Commonwealth for a retraining package.
It is also the obligation of governments where people are hurt through no fault of their own as a consequence of that economic change and reform. It's necessary to give a bit of assistance to those people.
The actual amount workers will receive depends on the successful sale of the failed Rutherford plant, but workers are now guaranteed most of their money.
So that these people may, with the assistance of the two governments, be able to get on with their lives, and I wish them and their families a better fortune in the future.
Earlier today, Opposition Leader Kim Beazley received a warm welcome at the picket line when he pledged to introduce new legislation to protect sacked workers.
It ought not to be, as Reith is proposing, a partial burden on the Australian taxpayer. It ought to be on the employers. That's where it ought to reside.
While today represents a victory for this group of workers, the Cabinet is also considering a broader safety net scheme that will protect the rights of all Australian workers in the future. Paul Lobb, NBN News, Late Edition.
Arthur Vinicum admits in 1984 he helped dump human faeces from these very toilets in Violet Hill onto the ground just 100 metres from the water.
It used to be carted up along the rise and under the bung and away it'd go.
Arthur says he was also ordered by his National Parks and Wildlife Supervisor to release truckloads of effluent at a Mungo brush site, and he fears it wouldn't have taken much for it to seep into the nearby lake system.
It was a very steep hill, so the next rain would have certainly took the bulk of it down into the bottom of the paper. The bulk of it would have went down into the lake anyway.
The Mara lakes have for many years been choked by outbreaks of blue-green algae. Still no direct cause has been identified, but phosphorus produced by human activity and habitation is believed to be a contributing factor.
Oh, it was very, very wrong. And that's of course, it's accumulated now. All the phosphorus, all sorts of be accumulated in the sediment in the lakes now.
While it can't rule out dumping of effluent may have in fact occurred, National Parks and Wildlife say it was policy at the time to bury sewage in night trenches.
It's not ideal looking back, and there's many things across the whole catchment that you wouldn't do today. We need much better systems, we have much better systems, but at the time that was common.
Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
In a photograph, inside a painting with people.
Dog Beach.
Dog Beach.
Down in Horseshoe.
Yes, there's also.
I don't say. What? Oh, I'm just, I don't really have to. Yeah. So,
It was an opportunity for the Minister to hear first-hand concerns from both the Martyr and John Hunter Hospital staff.
We'll work on improving the Hunter Health system together, we'll work together and we will get solutions.
Exasperated Martyr workers pleaded with the state government to throw them a lifeline to alleviate the facility's funding crisis.
He saw what the situation is in the wards and in the emergency department and made it very clear that in his eyes as well as ours this was unacceptable.
Ruling out the privatisation of the Martyr once and for all, Minister Knowles says the state government is exploring other funding avenues.
Nobody's ever said that we won't be funding the Martyr. I've made it very clear this morning that the Martyr is an integral part of the health services in this region. What we're doing though is looking at all of the options for the integration of the Martyr with another not-for-profit provider.
Whether their concerns will be addressed in the coming months remains to be seen.
He told us we should be sceptical, that he was trying to do the job, he had new ideas and things he wanted to do, and we should be sceptical, and I suppose we are. We have had problems in the past.
And although no money was forthcoming today, the health prognosis seems definitely brighter.
I don't think it was realistic to expect the Minister to arrive today with an open chequebook. He came to listen to us.
Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
While there has been no direct approach, reports indicate that Matthew and Andrew Johns are priority buyers for English club Wakefield. NRL clubs are forbidden to bid for players until June 30 under poaching laws, but it's unsure whether those rules extend to overseas clubs.
That's something that I am currently investigating.
It's not the only thing Bonnet isn't sure on.
I'm not 100% sure that it's not their manager that deliberately goes about it doing it that way. So he obviously thinks in conjunction with the players that maybe that's better for them. I don't know. And we're not going to enter into discussions with them for some time to come yet.
What else is clear? The club doesn't want a repeat of the last time the pair came up for contract during 1997, when speculation was rife for most of the season.
We don't want to get distracted by, rumours and other innuendo about the Johnses. We've got a season to concentrate on this.
A week in rugby league is a long time. Just ask Adam McDougall. After being caught out against the Northern Eagles in his new fullback role, the State of Origin star bounced back against the Storm.
I probably copped a bit of bang during the week leading into the game, so I had a pretty big point to prove and I was pretty determined to prove it.
And one who'll be keen to do just that this weekend at Marathon Stadium is Owen Craigie. The centre, unwanted by Newcastle, has been starring for the Tigers and will be hunting for a night scalp on Sunday.
He's obviously going to have a big point to prove, and when a player's got a point to prove, they're always dangerous.
Of those who'll have the job of containing Craigie will be rising night swinger Tamana Tahu, with the teenager making his mark in the top grade in recent weeks.
Every young player that comes into grade, I think, in the top grade needs a landmark game. I thought that was his game the other day, or the other night. I thought that was a top-notch game from him.
And just who does wear the pants at the Newcastle Knights? It appears Energy Australia, the power company, snapped up the short sponsorship for the next 3 years. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Another week, another lifeline. This time, Prime Minister Howard has suggested sacked workers from Scone's fresh meat plant could also be eligible for his employee benefit safety scheme.
That if that closure has occurred since the 1st of January, they will, in accordance with the announcement made by the Minister, they'll be entitled to the benefit of the safety net scheme.
80 employees were laid off from the meatworks on the 14th of January when the business folded. To add to the blow, they've only received 40 cents in the dollar owed to them. The abattoir has since reopened but only re-employed around half of its original workforce. That leaves 40 people without a job and with few prospects.
these people, they bust their bellies and hearts to get their entitlements, and all they get is 40 cents in the dollar. It's just wrong.
We'll fight as hard as we have to fight, you know, as hard as we can fight for all the people in Scone with young families and people without jobs.
Whether they win the fight depends on whether they meet the criteria. The Prime Minister saying that eligibility depends on the economic state of the area and the fact that workers were laid off after the 1st of January.
If he's not prepared to grant that assistance, he needs to explain what is his additional criteria and where Scone didn't meet them.
Now the federal government wants their state counterparts to chip in as well.
That I have written to my counterpart in New South Wales, Mr Jeff Shaw, the Minister for Industrial Relations. I have advised him of the approach that we will be taking, and I have asked him to advise me what approach the New South Wales government will itself be taking.
Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
All Chris Nicholson wants to do is sail at the Olympics, and the Australian Yachting Federation seemingly wants the same after it nominated him to represent in the 49er class. However, the Court of Arbitration for Sport has seen it differently, upholding the appeal of Nicholson's rival, Adam Bieshel.
Yes, it is a little draining. We need this out of the way, we need it finished, and we just want to get on with the job that we want to do, and that's get to the Olympics and win a gold.
Bieshel's beef: his crew beat Nicholson in the Olympic selection regattas and therefore should get the nod, but the AYF criteria for nomination stretch further than that.
The fact that a person wins the nomination series does not automatically entitle them to be selected. The criteria is that they have to select the crew with the best prospects of winning a medal at the Olympic Games.
It's a safety net that Nicholson believes has clearly worked. After all, he's the only man to win a world championship in the class and says figures speak for themselves.
In international competition, over the course of us being in the class, we come in a medal winning position. That's top three. We make that 92% of the time, and it's just it's numbers that I don't think anyone else in the world can match.
Nicholson heads to Mexico next weekend to compete for an historic 4th consecutive world title. Hopefully by then he'll know if he's heading to Sydney 2000 in September.